Welcome to the Abundant Minds Reinventing Energy and Money podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have Storm Run. He's the president of the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association. He's also the chief operating officer at Red Dirt Mining, a mining company in Oklahoma. Storm and I attended Southern Methodist University together in Dallas, Texas for a few years and graduated there. He also graduated from NYU Law and has been instrumental in advocating for Bitcoin rights, as well as fostering the growth of Bitcoin mining in the state of Oklahoma. Over the last few weeks, Storm has actually helped pass the Blockchain Basics Act in Oklahoma through both the State House and the State Senate, and we're currently waiting for the governor's signature to get fully passed into law, which would be a huge victory in Oklahoma. It sounds like that might occur within just the next couple days if all goes well. So today we're diving into his personal journey, how he got into mining, and what it takes for a state to adopt Bitcoin. So Storm, welcome to the show, man.
It's great to be here, Bo. I'm glad that you guys are doing this podcast. I'm happy to be on here. That was a great introduction. Thank you for highlighting everything that we're working on. I'm thrilled to get to talk to you today, man.
Absolutely, man. I'm really appreciative that you were willing to come on, and really glad that you're here with us today. And really just want to get right into it and start for a couple minutes. The simple question to open us up is, how did you get here? How'd you get into the Bitcoin mining space and fighting to protect it in your state of Oklahoma?
What is my Bitcoin story, if you will? So I went to undergraduate with Bo, obviously, as you mentioned. We went to SMU. I'm from Oklahoma City originally. I grew up here, Dallas for undergrad. And then following undergrad, I went to law school in New York. New York during COVID was a very interesting time to not just be in law school, but to be in New York City as well. So during 2020, I decided to not spend my time in New York City, and I came back to Oklahoma for that year. All the classes were remote, and I had more free time probably than I've ever had in my entire life. And I finally took one of my friends up on researching something called Bitcoin. I have a friend who's now my business partner, whose name is Kaz Baiko. He had been trying to get me to even remotely take Bitcoin seriously. And by that, I mean like read an article that he would send me for probably, since we were in high school, probably 2014, 2015. And much to my chagrin, I ignored him for about 6 or 7 years. And that was a very expensive mistake. And so when we got to 2019, really, I started like kind of piquing my interest about it. I thought it was, of course, dead when it went to $3,000, just like everything when the pandemic happened. But I started actually researching it probably spring of 2020. I had, went through my customary shitcoin phase, and when I was in college in 2016, found an old Cardano wallet that got my Bitcoin stack started. And then, I just sort of caught the bug. When I was in law school, I knew I had wanted to study privacy and data security topics. And that's what I pursued. Pretty much every class I took was something to do with global data law or information privacy, which is cool. It covers a lot of different constitutional topics, such as Fourth Amendment, First Amendment. And basically, I just wanted to take every class I could that even tangentially related to Bitcoin. So that's something I kept pursuing. I looked into quote unquote crypto practices at different law firms that were just starting to become a thing. There were some, unique boutique shops that worked in the ICO booms during 2017, 2018. But a crypto industry group in earnestness at like big New York firms didn't really exist until 2020, 2021. So that was sort of what I was looking at, but I went and worked for one of the big mega firms, and I just didn't ever really see myself as a big corporate attorney. And at the same time anyone who's fallen down the Bitcoin rabbit hole obviously understands what it's like. It's like a brain virus, and you can't help but apply everything that you're working or doing to it through the lens of through the lens of Bitcoin. And sort of at the same time, I had bought some miners from a hosting company. I won't name which one, but they were never plugged in, of course. And I lost a fair amount of money on that. And I had been sort of just angrily talking about starting a hosting business to rectify this injustice. And Kaz and I had sort of been talking about a mining company, and probably my last semester at law school, we had sort of talked about actually forming, an LLC, getting something small started off the ground. And that's what we did. So we started a business. I decided I was going to forego my full-time offer at the law firm. And I came back to Oklahoma. We started really in just a small industrial lot around a lot of, like car repair shops, and just took this building and made it like a very small Bitcoin mine. And then we graduated to bigger on-grid opportunities in rural Oklahoma, which is sort of where I've seen firsthand the promise of Bitcoin mining being an engine of economic revitalization of rural territories or rural areas, especially in places like Oklahoma. The town that one of our sites is next to is about 200 people, and we've brought that site up, and now we're looking to do off-grid work too. And then that is sort of all snowballed into also working on the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association. We had been hosting the Oklahoma City meetup. There's actually a very active Tulsa meetup that has been probably one of the longest running Bitcoin meetups in the country. And we started the OBA. It's a 501c6 nonprofit. And we brought the Oklahoma City and Tulsa Bitcoin meetups under an umbrella organization. We hired a lobbying firm. We got in touch with Satoshi Action Fund. And we have just been basically building out our grassroots level community advocacy work. And we had 2 bills that we're supporting through this legislative session. And that has all just sort of been a product of the last 6 months of work or so. I mean, the 501c6 wasn't fully fired up until October of last year. So we had a launch event, got everything going, and it is just remarkable how quickly this is all unfolded. So for context, I mean, people typically don't think about Oklahoma as like a premier destination for Bitcoin mining. And that's just because we're in the shadow of Texas, but actually we're probably one of the most favorable places to start large mines. Bitcoin mining is going to be the largest industry by electricity consumption in the state of Oklahoma by the end of the year, which is crazy. Every legislator I talk to, oil and gas guy, nobody really understands that or understands the economic significance of it. So we've seen some states like New York, Arkansas, that respond negatively to these types of developments. And that is one of our biggest missions at the OBA, is to educate our lawmakers, our policymakers, our regulators about why this is an industry that the state should embrace. And if we take positive action and have good interactions between the industry members and a trade association, and then also our elected officials, we can accomplish some really cool stuff. And that's something that I've seen over the last few months just doing this is talking to your state officials is actually very productive. I'm sure we'll get into the details of that, but that was a very long-winded answer to just say, I mine Bitcoin and I try to help out Bitcoin miners in Oklahoma.
That's awesome, man. And that's your origin story is not so dissimilar to mine. I had a couple years of shitcoining, got into mining a couple times, failed attempts through amazingly not the same company that you had a rough experience with, but similar to you, had the experience of, I better go start a co-location company so that I can rectify the injustice of these.
It's like the cat sipping coffee meme, the newspaper. I just like to imagine it's like a terms and conditions that I realize that I have no rights over the miners I just bought, and I got to start a mining company.
It's a tough space to get into if you don't have either helping hand, someone who you trust, or a wide array of knowledge coming into it that helps you to set something up yourself. But
Yeah.
in the context of this conversation, I mean, you've come a long way from getting a school of hard knocks education in mining to now getting the governor should be signing your blockchain basics bill in the next couple of days, which Dennis was the first guest on our podcast, and we were excited to get to dive into the legislative process with him. And I know you've been able to work with he and Satoshi Action Fund one-on-one quite a bit in getting this passed. So I'm curious if you could walk us through a little bit, maybe weave in your law background, if you could, to
Yeah.
walk us through how that's actually taken shape in Oklahoma.
Yeah. And what do you want me specifically to cover? I mean, do you want, or are you interested in sort of like how a bill becomes, how do you even introduce a bill like this? What is it like talking to state legislators? Sort of that angle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it starts with, just language. I mean, you got to have the basic bare bones language of the bill that will be altered and amended, and there will be negotiations that you have to have over the course of time, over the course as session plays out. And every state's different. Texas only meets once every 2 years. Every state has their sort of idiosyncratic practices of how you get a bill introduced. What sort of requirements you have to satisfy in order to have this bill actually be heard by anybody. But in Oklahoma, the way you do it is you introduce your language, you find a bill author in the House and the Senate, and they will then begin the process of introducing the bill to committee. And then once it comes out of committee in the House where the bill originates. So this specific bill, we originated in the House with Representative Brian Hill. Brian is fantastic. He is somebody who believes in economic development of Oklahoma. It's no secret that the economy of Oklahoma is heavily dependent on oil and gas. So it is just a part of Oklahoma where we need to find ways to diversify our economic activity. And we want to lean into tech sectors. We want to lean into anything that relates to energy also. So Bitcoin mining is a very interesting hybrid concept that these people can really easily wrap their heads around once they have somebody to show up and tell them why those two things actually overlap. We got our bill author in the House. It goes to committee. It then gets voted in the House floor. It then gets sent to the Senate, where it does the exact same process. It goes to committee, presented by your author, and then it goes to the Senate floor. It goes back to the House. And all along the way, you have people that look at the bill and say, not this. Have you asked this commission about this? Have you asked this executive agency about this? Have you had Mike so-and-so at the securities office sign off on this? And that's just something that you need good lobbyists. I mean, really at the state level, you need good lobbyists to understand the relationships that people have, who's running for what, who hates who really likes who. And there's an entire process of just navigating the social reality of any sort of state legislator, because this is not like Washington. It's not huge, high politics. It's very much intimate. It's the people are close to their constituents. They care about what a bill is going to affect the people who vote for them. They care about how this is going to make them look to their committee members, their colleagues across the aisle. This is all very, very collegial in certain ways. And I think that actually makes the sort of the social experiences much richer and more authentic in a way. I think when this is my first session working these bills, and I don't know what sort of perceptions I came in with. I think maybe more of the Washington stereotypes influenced what I thought the type of work was going to be. But I've been delighted to see. I mean, it's really cool to see the representatives and senators in the Oklahoma State Legislature very much care about their constituents. They're willing to hear anyone out that actually shows up in earnest and can talk with expertise about their subject matter. And they want to make Oklahoma a better place to do business, to live. And that is sort of what it looks like. So a lot of, I think what is it? Do you have any experience in Oregon sort of with this? Because I know we see on Twitter there's a lot of discourse about whether or not, I don't, oh, maybe not a lot to the naysaying side, but why should you even try to interface with politicians, right? There's the, well, code can just do everything, or don't rely on politicians to save you. And any sort of advocacy or interfacing with elected officials is just blowing hot air or wasting time. But I'm curious if you've had any experience with that, and just sort of if you have any thoughts. I mean, obviously you had Dennis on here and now you're having me, so I can infer a bit about where you stand on that, but yeah,
Sure.
curious.
Well, I mean, realistically, and this is something I want to get into with you a little bit, is we don't have the same kind of initiative here in Oregon yet to move a blockchain basics bill into the state house and get it passed into law. And I'm not sure that there's that same kind of appetite or momentum. And you talked about the electric use of mining being, the largest industrial electric use for the state of Oklahoma. And some people might hear that and be frightened of it rather than
Yeah.
encouraged by it. But I'm curious on your side if that was something that was actually helpful to you, if it was easier to frame it as an economic benefit to the state because it's already such a large part. Because here, at least, we're operating, but there's not many large sites, and Oregon is not known as necessarily a friendly place to mining, even if it's not
Hmm.
actively, combative to the industry. It sounds like
Hmm.
Oklahoma's definitely started off on a more receptive foot. You've already got a huge amount of industrial use of electricity, and from what I hear, it seems to be recognized by the people you're talking to as a benefit and not a extractive industry that's taking the wealth of the state. So maybe you could shed a little bit more light. Was it an easy introduction for you to most people, or did you face a lot of resistance?
So I would say the biggest thing is showing up. I think people, and this is where I will lovingly call myself a suit in this perspective but putting on a suit, showing up to the Capitol, going into someone's office, being prepared, speaking eloquently, answering their questions, being respectful, appreciating that they may know absolutely nothing about the industry. And when you tell them that this is now going to be one of the largest industrial consumers of electricity in the state, an elected official now all of a sudden might feel like they ought to know something about this. And so they may feel a bit defensive. But again, my experiences have been so overwhelmingly positive with people on both sides of the aisle, just because you can go in there and it's very easy to tell our story, and they're receptive to listening to you. Um, the range of reactions on the electricity question, just to answer that part specifically, is on the Democrat side. It's we have some representatives and senators who it's the classic. They have somewhat bought into the idea that any use of electricity that it's not easily understandable is therefore a waste of energy and electricity. And then on the Republican side, a lot of it is that, well, this can't be real economic development because the key performance indicators, the KPIs that we use as a state, are directly tied to jobs. And it is only about jobs that creates economic development. So there are interesting, when you're an advocate, and this is definitely where some of my law background comes in, is that you have to be able to present your industry in a way that's going to speak to the interests of these people. So it's no secret that Bitcoin mining does not create the most amount of jobs like a paper mill or a tire factory or something like this. But that doesn't mean it can't be an engine for economic benefits, especially when you pitch a Bitcoin mine as something like energy infrastructure. And that's really the way I have come to think about at least on-grid Bitcoin mining. Is that there are all these downstream economic benefits that when you're in the industry that you can see, as far as Bitcoin miners being dispatchable load resources and engaging in demand response programs, of utilizing stranded electricity infrastructure. My mine specifically, I mean, we took over a site that was a marijuana grow operation and we retrofitted it. to then become a Bitcoin mine. Well, that was steel that ratepayers paid for, and now are continuing to front the costs for. So when you're able to sort of distribute those fixed costs of infrastructure build out and grid build out over more customers, it does put downward pressure on electricity prices long term. And that's something that we're working with our utilities to sort of understand that aspect of things as well. And Oklahoma has very large, centralized, powerful utility companies. So it's just a series of ongoing conversations that we continue to have to help them understand our industry a little bit better, and then respond to their needs and their desires. So that is really the key part of this entire operation. Of as far as the political advocacy side goes, is you have to meet people where they're at, and a lot of state senators, I've been asked where you dig the Bitcoins out of. I'm not kidding. I've gotten that actual question. So you just really have to have the patience to, again, show up, keep showing up, answer people's questions, and then be able to describe the aspects of your industry that align with what they're interested in and what they're concerned with.
Do you think that, I'll frame this a way in which, I've thought about and we've talked about previously, that it would be a really good thing to model the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association and have one in Oregon, have the second OBA location.
OBA 2.
Oregon. And I'm curious if you think that was instrumental in your success in getting these bills passed through, because you had some grassroots support, that you had
was the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association?
Mm-hmm. Was that part of getting this over the line?
It was everything. What it is a collective action problem, right? Because you have quite a few operators in the state, whether it's people in the mining industry or tangential industries. You could have contractors, you could have energy consultants, you could have software companies that all want to see the mining industry grow in this jurisdiction, right? It doesn't have to only be about the mining industry, but this is a good example for what we're talking about. But you walk into the Capitol and you're just a business owner. That's good. It's good. And they want to hear from business owners. Typically, they want to hear from business owners that are operating in their district. That is more interesting. But when you represent a trade association, any legislator will want to talk to you, because now you are bringing them expertise on behalf of the industry. So one of the difficult aspects of getting any trade association started up is just establishing who you are, letting people know that your incentives are tied to their incentives, that you're trying to do what's best for the industry. And it's hard to find good people to lead these organizations. I think luckily, with the Tulsa Bitcoin meetup being as old as it is, we have so many people with great track records, between Kaz, Charlie Spears, myself, Micah Burge with New Energen, that have just built up really good relationships with the people that are operating in the state, that know, we love Bitcoin. We want to do what's best for Bitcoin. And that means building up social and political capital on behalf of the industry. Again, it is really that key dynamic of when you're just individual businesses and corporations that are acting alone, there's only so much you can do. When you are talking about an entire industry and what it can do for the state, our elected officials are really, really amenable to hearing that. So as far as modeling out the Bitcoin Association, and maybe we can get into I want to be careful on this topic, but the Bitcoin Association versus Blockchain Council type discussion. But I definitely think is a model that is recreatable, but it all comes down to people. Who are you going to get to lead it? And if you can get good people that you believe represent the industry well, that are eloquent, that will show up, that will be respectful, then you can really do some pretty incredible things together in your state. And that's why I think, regardless of what any provision of any bill says, I think the biggest thing that we've accomplished this session, and that something that people outside of Oklahoma won't appreciate is just that our elected officials all know who to come talk to now. We have a association full of talented people, full of people who care about the industry, and now not just playing offense of getting legislation passed, but anytime something like what's going on in Arkansas right now happens, I mean, we have good social relationships with these people where we can say, hey, let's sit down, let's slow down. This may not be the path that we want to go. Here's X, Y, and Z reason why. Here's 5 businesses that are operating our state that we can all go out to dinner together and we can talk about these things. That type of social capital, I'm going to keep using that word because that's what it is just not something that you can just pull out of thin air. And you don't want to wait until it's too late, till something bad happens. Some bill gets introduced that's going to de facto ban Bitcoin mining in your state to say, oh shit, now we got to get together and figure out what we're going to do. And we need to figure out who's in charge of what. We need to do all this. It's like, no, if you've been doing the grassroots Bitcoin education from the get-go, and these representatives and senators know who you are and know that you've spent time making sure that they know that you care about their understanding what we're talking about, it goes so much further. And I'm sure you've heard the social layer referred to as layer zero of Bitcoin. I think some people balk at that and they think it's cheeky, but I think it's 100% true. These are human-made decisions. Bitcoin is made by humans. This is an engineered system, and what happens in actual meat space matters a lot. And it matters for the place where we live. And, I think the biggest thing is I want this to be a Bitcoin hub. I want Oklahoma to be a Bitcoin hub. And I think the more buy-in you can get from the people who actually, have the political power and make decisions within the state, the more likely that becomes. And that's our goal. And that's what I really want. I would love to see that model of sort of what we've been able to build in a short amount of time and what we're continuing to build expand into other states.
I completely agree with you on the social capital aspect. That is one of the most important resources that we can rally to our benefit is getting people bought in on the mission. And for what it's worth, once the misunderstandings are cured, I think that it's really easy to get on the mission because if you do the research, Bitcoin mining is removing pollutants from the atmosphere, it's balancing grids, it's lowering the cost of energy for certain jurisdictions. It's in many places where the operators are good operators and not, willfully bringing violence to communities with a bunch of noisy fans, just pissing people off with noise, essentially not doing the bare minimum. Apart from those operators, good operators, I think, are bringing a lot of benefit to the communities that they set up in. And you mentioned your first site being a 200-person town, essentially. And that's very similar for our first site, where we can have the most impact on these small communities because even with the relatively modest sized facility, you can meaningfully impact the tax base of a community.
100%.
Copy and paste that in several rural towns, and you've got an entire portion of the state that's being benefited by your business. One thing that I wanted to ask you is, I see you personally as a leader. I think you were on the forefront leading the charge of something very important in your state. And I'm curious if you could point to any personal qualities that you think that you have that have made you uniquely successful in this. If there's anything that drives you or any kind of personality trait that you think's made you uniquely successful in getting this over the line.
Neuroticism, constant worry that Bitcoin is going to, be kept out of Oklahoma by bad decision making. No, I mean, I can only really answer that question in ways that I've heard. And it's something that I've already alluded to so far. And that's just that people, when they get into Bitcoin, forget what it was like before they got into Bitcoin. And it's hard for me every day. When I have to go explain Bitcoin to somebody who doesn't understand it, sometimes I do the sailor thing where I take deep breath, and it's like, oh, here we go again. I gotta explain this shit for the billionth time. Or, you see it as an opportunity to talk about this thing which I dedicate so much of my time to, and I try to bring that good outlook of just, this is cool that I get to explain this to somebody, and this person is genuinely interested. I think that can be differentiated from what's typically referred to as orange pilling. I think orange pilling sort of implies that you have a captive audience and an unwilling listener. And then you're just going to, through the magic of words and stories, you're just going to all of a sudden like convince this person like, whoa, I get it. That's sort of why that Ohio State graduation speaker, I just don't believe that strategy is what's going to do us any favors moving forward. You have a captive audience of people that are there to watch their kids walk across the stage, and like you choose this point to like talk to them about why the financial system is broken and everything they believe is a lie. It's a weird setting to do something like that. So I think when I get to show up at the Capitol and I have our elected officials, and or just when we're having a meetup and we just have members of our community showing up and they have spent their time to either give us a meeting or to come to a meetup, and they genuinely want to hear about Bitcoin, the least you can do is put on a good attitude about it. So I think that's part of it. Is I think people can tell I'm genuine. I want them to understand Bitcoin. I appreciate their questions. I really do believe deep down that there are no dumb questions about Bitcoin. Even where do you dig the Bitcoins out of the ground? Because I mean, hey, let's reflect. The word mining is a terrible misnomer. So I think that's part of it. And I think I always just try to tell people like, that's a great question. I don't let anyone feel dumb when they're trying to learn about Bitcoin, because hell, I had to hear the same things when I first got into Bitcoin about 50,000 times before they stuck in any meaningful capacity. And then, another 10,000 times before I could explain it to anybody else. So it's patience, it's grace with other people, and just understanding that this is a long game. It's really easy to get frustrated and down on yourself every time we see some national politician who just clearly does not understand Bitcoin speak dogmatically about why it's going to fail or why it's enabling crime or doing whatever they think it's doing. But having conversations at the local level and really focusing on our communities, I think, is just the best way that we can actually spend our time. Charlie actually tweeted this out after we got a lot of grassroots support, like an email mail-in campaign for the Blockchain Basics Act. It was just that, 1 5-minute email to your legislator is worth 1,000 angry tweets. So I think just having that grace, patience, perspective for people who want to learn about Bitcoin and may even feel hostile towards it. I've had those interactions too, where like the person feels really skeptical. And I mean, what I tell them is, thank you for your skepticism, because you're right to be skeptical about any of this. So let me help you be skeptical about the right things. And yeah, I think that just goes a long way of meeting people where they're at, making it feel like you're working with them to build up towards an understanding. And yeah,
we're working with people who often have no other reason to study a technology like this. And so, like you said, there has to be a level of grace that we're willing to extend to them to make space for them to come and see what we see, so to speak. And that doesn't usually happen by pushing and shoving and proselytizing and evangelizing in a really ineffective way. It's really meeting people where they are. And that's part of our core value at Abundant Minds is compassion, because not everybody is on your level. Not everybody knows what you know. Not everybody has had the opportunity to study this for hundreds of hours, like many of the people who work in our organization. And so you have to be able to meet people exactly where they are, with love, with understanding, with just the joy that you get to potentially bring them up to where you are if they are so willing.
Yeah. And something I think that a lot of Bitcoiners, this totally goes over their head and they, like some people would find preposterous, is that there's plenty of people out there that just really don't care about money and investing and saving that much. Like it's just, they don't think about it that often. You know, if they could have somebody else just do anything with their money, like just, hey, put it over there so I never ever have to think about this stuff, they would. And that's actually a very large percentage of the population. And so, how do you get that person to care about Bitcoin? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you can talk about human rights, and you can talk about just sort of from a more general tech perspective, or maybe they care about privacy, or who knows. But it's always that you can't just go in with a dogmatic opinion of just like, for any given person, I can orange pill them like this by saying these things, or it's not a very productive way to approach education from a compassionate standpoint, to use your word. But yeah, I'm sure you've probably had conversations like that as well.
No, I totally agree with you. And it's that constant problem of, this is something that I think I can say for both of us, we've given our lives to for many years of our lives, and probably will give many more years of our lives to. And so we're very passionate about how much this can impact people. And I truly believe that it is impactful to everybody on earth, even if they don't know what it is or understand it. And so to me, there is a right way in for every person, but it does take work to figure out what that right way in is for people, right? Some people understand energy more. Some people do actually pay attention to money, and they want to understand more why it's so different than any money that they've ever seen. Other people are interested, like you said, from the human rights element, where it brings rights to a whole class of billions of people who have not had the kind of the freedoms that we enjoy in the Western world, frankly. And it's at both instances amazing that people don't get this, and totally understandable, right? There was years where the internet was impacting millions or hundreds of millions of people, in which most people didn't use it or understand it or have any sense of what value it might bring. And so part of our work, I believe, is being able to see that future that's 10, 20 years away, in which this has already impacted everyone that we know, and working backwards from there, and trying to get people to that bright orange future that we see already so clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's one of the sort of values and goals, initiatives, whatever you want to call it, that I really want to instill in the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association is trying to reach more people by just recognizing that it's really fun to learn about this thing. It's sort of what does Mark Goodwin call it? I think he calls it the water's warm maximalism of we don't have to try to scare people into liking or buying Bitcoin. I mean, we don't have to be doomers all the time of just like, well, the fiat system is going to collapse and therefore, you go get on the lifeboat. Like there's grains of truth to all of those different like narrative angles. But I think one I would love to see Bitcoiners interact with more, and I think is very appropriate in the local community aspect, is like, this is really fun. So, I mean, one thing that we're doing is we're trying to find local food growers and getting them S9s hooked up as like greenhouse heating operations. So we've got a couple that are going like that. And it's just like trying to integrate with schools and, picking apart an ASIC, putting it back together, trying to find ways to, all of this ordinals craziness that's going on. How do you use that to appeal to like a different group of people who are maybe interested in like art or some of these other aspects of Bitcoin that it could touch? How do we just present this as something that is just like, it doesn't have to be so deadly serious all the time. There are definitely super serious aspects of Bitcoin that I really enjoy focusing on and having talks about and covering with people. But it doesn't always need to be so heavy-handed. And so that's one thing I'm really interested in exploring, and I'm looking forward to having more conversations with people about, is how do we sort of add that tool to our toolkit as far as advocacy and community engagement goes, and how do we build up that muscle? because I'm sure any Bitcoiner can relate. It's like, it really is fun learning about this stuff. It's fun learning about energy and physics when it comes to airflow principles in a Bitcoin mine. It's fun learning about the history of money and economics and these things when it's pitched to you in the right way. So that sort of educational philosophy is something I would love to see more people lean into.
I love that. And I agree when people describe, or I've often described Bitcoin as a mirror to our existing financial system. It's the first thing that we've been able to see that really holds up a light that allows you to see everything else more clearly. And I do think that extends, if you study it long enough, to the person studying it as well, not just a mirror to the financial system, but a mirror to your own beliefs about money, and the way that wealth and energy moves around in the world. So I'm curious, maybe you could talk for a minute about how studying Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining has changed your personal beliefs around life, money, energy, and time.
What a massive question. I would say one of the most obvious ones are Bitcoin's killer app for me is like, I might be that person that like, I wish I didn't have to invest. I wish I didn't have to like ever think about this stuff. I want to work on what I'm working on. And then when I'm not working, I want to pursue all the billions of hobbies that I seem to always be picking up, and spend time with my friends and family. So I think that promise has made me think about, what it means to live a good life, and what it means to invest your time, where you want it to, because it puts into perspective, right? Of just, if I didn't have to think about money, and like money wasn't an object. And I'm not saying that if you buy Bitcoin, all of a sudden you're going to find yourself in a position where money is not an object. That's not what I'm saying. But if it was just de-emphasized in your life, what is truly important? And I think Bitcoin sort of makes you reflect on those types of things. And so I've definitely had some family misfortunes over the last few years. And I think just sort of having that framework of like, all right, money's not everything. And what is a good way to spend my more precious resource, which is my time. And ironically, I do believe that Bitcoin has sort of been a tool to, push me into those sort of postures of reflection over those types of aspects of life. And then I think it just, more than anything, I've always been a very curious person from a young age, and just always wanting to learn new things and pick up new skills. But man, talk about something that can just totally invigorate your desire for knowledge, and is just a never ending quest to learn more. I mean, like, go talk to your favorite dev about Opcat and you think you understand Bitcoin. You don't understand hardly probably anything. And it's just crazy the amount of talent and appreciation I have for how limited my knowledge is about this, and how limited it will probably always be. It touches on so many different things, and you hop on Twitter and there's probably an expert on any given aspect of Bitcoin that'll make you feel dumb about something. But instead of feeling insecure about that, you can be appreciative and grateful and be like, wow, look at these people that I get to be surrounded by, and look at these people who I'm probably one person removed from if I just want to have a conversation with them. And it's just really cool. And native currency of the internet, I think it kind of brings out those like the positive aspects of the internet. It's like, oh, those are actually things that you can do when we're all connected this way. It's like you can reach out and get connected with someone and learn so many different things, just by asking. So again, that sort of that posture of openness, I think, is definitely reflected by Bitcoin. It's very easy to get black-pilled and doomer about just the internet and the negative effects that it has had on its life. It has become very in vogue to talk about those things and emphasize those things and focus those things. But the internet also has a lot of really cool aspects of it too. And I think Jack Dorsey has been talking a lot using that language of finding a native decentralized currency for the internet. And maybe Bitcoin will do something to sort of rectify this advertising based model that has corrupted a lot of the original principles of what the internet promised in the 80s and 90s. So I think thinking about those things. For any listeners that aren't into Bitcoin, notice I'm focusing on a lot of positive things. There's a lot of really cool things. It's not just about doomerism. The dollar is going to die and you have to buy Bitcoin because of fear. No, there are a lot of really positive aspects of this asset, technology, network, whatever you want to call it, that you can probably find something that aligns with your interests relatively quickly, and you're definitely going to be able to find somebody who's passionate about that same thing.
I love that answer. And I totally agree, Storm. I spent most of my early life, call it late teens into my early 20s, thinking about how I could learn how to invest and, hold 10 to 15 to 20 different things that I believed in to try and outpace inflation or whatever my personal hurdle rate was to get enough wealth to live a good life. And in many ways, Bitcoin was the antidote to the diversification mindset, because I found something that I could believe in enough to essentially go all in and have yourself changed by something that is truly profound, rather than hedging amongst a bunch of things that you hopefully understand a little bit.
Let me ask you something there, Bo. You brought up something interesting. So do you host your own, let's say, skepticism about the wisdom of diversification?
I do. Growing up, I thought that it was a very wise way to tell people to invest. And I, to some extent, still believe that it's important to be diversified among different projects, maybe, especially if, like me, you are almost 100% allocated in the Bitcoin space. But at least in terms of how I would build true, lasting, meaningful wealth, I felt like as soon as I understood Bitcoin, everything else was diluting what knowledge I had come to, or what understanding I had come to about this technology. Seeing it in the context of the internet, other technologies that were adopted on an S curve, like electricity or radio or the typewriter, I view it in that class of technologies where if you get on the right wave, it's very dilutive to focus on anything else other than that wave. And I guess I would agree with Saylor on that point, where the mobile wave started in '08 to maybe 2010, where everything started moving onto things like the iPhone and smaller modular devices that people could carry with them, which was totally transformative at the time. And not that many people saw that coming, but the people who got in on the right 3 to 5 companies that were capitalizing on that wave far outperformed every other market participant. And so, from my perspective, or bought Bitcoin, right? But from my side, I would say that we're in the same kind of time period with Bitcoin, where it's out there, it's impacting millions, it's widely distributed, but not widely understood. And so there's still a lot of information gap to be made up in the market before Bitcoin is at anything like what we would call its total addressable market.
Yeah, I was
going to say, I've had a penchant toward early stage companies since I was young, so that maybe plays into it a little bit.
Nice. Well, I think that's, you touched on something that is why I'm bringing up sort of that openness and that water's warm maximalism that Mark Goodwin talks about, is that for those people who come in on sort of that same angle that you just detailed and articulated there, it is that just, hey, come in and talk. It's like you're going to find somebody who is just willing to just effectively donate you a ton of time to just talk about the way that they think about these things, and probably has a very similar sort of psychological development cycle with respect to investing in money that you do. And they're going to be excited to talk to you about that. I just wish there was more of an emphasis on that in Bitcoin. It's like, of being the fact that there's so many people in this community that are just willing to talk to people who want to come in a genuine genuine position of interest. So yeah.
Well, Storm, we're coming up on the hour. I want to open it up to you to offer any final thoughts that you've got on Bitcoin in Oklahoma, and anything that you're working on that you want to leave the audience with.
First, don't sleep on Oklahoma. We're not just Texas's younger brother. As far as a per capita basis goes, I'd like to think we're kicking ass as far as the Bitcoin mining industry goes. We've got a lot of promising opportunities here. If you're a company or you are an educator or anything and you want to come hang out with us, we've got 2 great meetups. We are plugged into the universities. We've got our vice president, Kaz Baiko, is going to be an adjunct professor of Bitcoin at University of Oklahoma this fall. I know he's always looking for guest speakers. We have a lot going on out here, and we are working really, really hard to make this into a Bitcoin hub that people want to come hang out at. Let's see, as far as any sort of last thoughts or pieces of advice, if you want to start getting active in your state, reach out to me. If you're looking for strategies that will be successful on just how do we get enough money to, even get like some sort of lobbyist that could help us out, help us navigate this process, or you just want to start and you just want to start educating your local officials and you just don't know how. You don't know how to get people to actually show up and do it. One answer is probably definitely start getting plugged in with your local meetup, and you're going to find other like-minded people who want to work on the same thing. Really focus on that. That is worth so much more than shit posting on Twitter or screaming about whatever the most recent Elizabeth Warren faux pas is. We've got plenty of people that are covering that aspect of it, but who's not covering your local community? All of those people. You need to be covering your local community. Get plugged in, educate people, just offer these types of services. Find ways that it could potentially fund itself. If you have the time, put up the time. If you don't have the time, that's okay. Delegate it to other people. But there's a never-ending community of people out there on the internet that are willing to help you out, and I would like to consider myself as one of them. So get in touch. Would love to talk about what your community needs. And then go ahead.
People can reach out to you at storm@oklahomabitcoin.org. Is there anywhere else that you want to point them that they can directly get in touch with you?
You can probably find me on LinkedIn. You can definitely join our mailing list at oklahomabitcoin.org, and find me on Twitter too. It's _BTC Storm. I would love to hear from you guys.
Awesome. Well, Storm, I really appreciate you coming on today. I am personally so grateful to call you a friend and so excited that we get to work on something so meaningful together. It's such a cool thing to get to connect with people who are doing something thousands of miles away that is just as near and dear to my heart as working on Bitcoin here in Oregon. And again, so grateful that you came on with us. Thank you for sharing your story and the value with our audience, and look forward to having you on again.
Of course. Thank you, Bo.